Have you ever felt invisible in your own story? The city's cold hum presses against your skin. You're clutching a letter, one that's both a reminder and a ghost of who you once were. Underneath shimmering city lights, Rebecca's silence screams louder than words. Her past battles, her sacrifices, her fight just to be remembered. What do you do when the world forgets the face behind the uniform? When the cheers fade and all that's left is emptiness? Can she find her voice amid the noise? Reclaim her truth before it's gone forever? Her hands tremble. The envelope's weight feels like a burden. Each detail, a fragment of a life she fought to hold on to. The stiff cardstock thick as armor, the watercolor of Soma's vineyards, the words, "all who matter most," a cruel reminder. Echoes of her silence fill the room. The clock ticks, the fridge hums, no perfume, no candles, just the scent of dried sweat. Her phone flashes with a familiar name. "Got it," she whispers. A pause. They used the wrong name again, didn't they? Silence hangs heavy. "Yeah," she breathes out. "They didn't forget. They erased me." Breath pressed tight against her ribs. She exhales. Sound of defiance, of heartbreak. Sarah's voice softens. "You don't owe them anything, Beck." A lie or truth? No one knows. She's given 20 years of silence, more than they ever showed her. Now, as she slumps onto the counter, the envelope by her side, her story feels out of place, like a peacock standing alone in a war room, wild and uninvited. In a city that forgets, can Rebecca find her voice, or will her silence become her final echo? Rebecca once overheard a colleague say, "I just handle admin stuff in the military." It stung, like a jab to her pride, as if she merely filed invoices. Just last week, she had decoded a network infiltration that could have taken down 2 drones midair. But Sarah lived in a world where truth didn't pay. To her, Rebecca was a liability, a shadow that threatened her polished image. Closing her eyes, Rebecca tried to convince herself it didn't matter anymore. Their absence from her commissioning ceremony, because Charlotte had a wine tasting that weekend, should have severed whatever tether remained. But it hadn't. The knot they tied wasn't around them. It was around her. She stood and opened the closet beside the kitchen. Her uniform hung there, precisely as she left it, pressed, ready. The insignia on her chest caught the kitchen light, glinting like a badge of honor. She ran her hand over the fabric, feeling that familiar weighted calm. It had seen deserts, storms, grief, and it had never failed her. But they didn't deserve to see her in it. They didn't deserve to claim any part of what that uniform had earned. With reverence, she folded it slowly, carefully, and placed it back in the closet. Turning toward her drawers, she pulled out a civilian dress. Plain, navy blue, fitted, quiet. No medals, no rank, just presence. That would be enough. Her phone buzzed, a message from Sarah. "They placed you next to the caterers again." Of course they did. A smile crept onto Rebecca's face, not bitter, but colder, sharper. She grabbed her coat, keys, and the envelope. As she stepped toward the door, she whispered into the still air, "Let them underestimate me. They always do." Arriving before the guests, she felt the weight of invisibility. The driveway was empty when she pulled up, not a single luxury SUV in sight, just rows of lavender hedges trimmed to perfection. The house stood like a photograph, perfect from afar, sterile up close. Charlotte's Philadelphia mansion was more set design than home, curated to impress, arranged to control. But tonight, Rebecca would reclaim her story. Would she finally break free from the silence that had bound her for so long? The air thickened with anticipation, and as she stepped inside, she could almost hear the echoes of her past calling her name. Would she answer? The garden was a perfection of trimmed hedges and silent shadows. Every plant knew its place better than I ever did. I lifted my hand, ringing once. The bell's chime was sharp, crisp, hollow. No welcome, just an echo of expectation. Marilyn was at the door before the sound faded. Her silk blouse shimmered like armor, her smile airbrushed into place. "You came," she said, voice smooth as wine, already pouring a glass of rosé from the hall. "Brave." Maybe, or maybe I'd walked into a war zone disguised as my sister's house. I told myself I got here early, kept my tone steady, didn't want to miss a thing. She stepped aside, hinting about the florist's delay, as if I was just a guest, not someone trying to find herself again. Inside, the foyer was a museum, polished marble floors, fresh hydrangeas like a pretense of sincerity. A framed photo of Charlotte and Jonathan sat on the table, their smiles bright, glossy. Her hand resting on the man's chest like a trophy, beneath a plaque that read, "Gratitude is the mark of grace." She's always been good at pretending, at curating perfection. Marilyn's voice pulled me from thought. Charlotte's in the sunroom. I nodded, automatic. Save the surprises. The scent of eucalyptus and manipulation lingered as I moved toward the corner. Charlotte was perched high, phone in one hand, a lavender ribbon in the other. "Rebecca," she called without looking. "Made it." That smile. That tone. Almost a command. I kept my voice level. "Wouldn't miss it." She gestured to a list on the table. "The guest rooms. Your room's next to the garage. It's a little snug, but we save the better suites for the out-of-towners. You understand?" I nodded, knowing the game. Jonathan's parents are flying in this afternoon. They're in the East Wing. I hesitated. The East Wing. Naturally, I wonder what that makes my section. The loading dock. Her gaze flicked over me, calculating, like a detail she'd already checked off her long to-do list. "That dress is sensible." That was the note. No laughter, just assessment. She turned back to her ribbons. Soon, the doorbell started its steady cadence. Social hierarchies in motion, each arrival a step further into this staged perfection. The air thickened with unspoken rules, with silences that screamed. Every detail, every smile, every word beneath the surface, all rehearsed. And yet, I was here, watching, waiting, wondering. How long could I pretend I belonged before I remembered who I was? I can still hear the clink of the glassware, the way the room seemed to press in on me. The taste of empty words, insubstantial as the air. Marilyn's smile was tight, her eyes darting, checking if I was playing my part. The sharp scent of perfume lingered as I carried the trays, feeling the weight of an identity that wasn't mine. The laughter in the background felt distant, muffled, as though I was already fading from the scene. No one asked for my name, just my actions. I was invisible in that house, in that moment. Marilyn floated through, air kissing and wrist touching, tossing compliments like currency. Charlotte, she was busy fine-tuning her image, dialing up the warmth in her voice for the guests. And me. I was the one carrying trays, coordinating napkin colors, becoming the unnoticed cog in their perfect machine. No one asked if I belonged. No one noticed I wasn't staff. I was simply there to be useful. To blend in. "She works in admin for the government," Marilyn said, introducing me to the vineyard couple, as if that title explained everything. I raised an eyebrow. "Strategic operations," I corrected. They blinked, confused, then nodded politely. I was the paperclip in a room full of diamonds, easily dismissed. Charlotte smiled her syrupy smile, her words sharp as a knife, but coated in sweetness. "Rebecca works with files and reports. Important ones." I smiled back, tight and practiced. In high school, she told her friends I worked with spreadsheets and secrets, like I was a glorified receptionist for the CIA. I'd heard it all before, but this time, across the room, someone aimed their phone at me. The camera focused, and then, with a click, it was gone. Deleted, like I wasn't even worth the space. I didn't move, didn't react. I just took another sip of my sparkling water and adjusted a vase by half an inch. They wanted me silent, ornamental. But I knew something they didn't. Furniture doesn't remember. Furniture doesn't watch, and furniture doesn't build strategy while holding a tray of vases. The woman with the phone glanced up, caught my eye, and flinched. Then she turned away. It was a small win, but I'd take it. While they posed for photos, I was positioning myself. One day, they'd realize I'd been in the frame all along, just out of focus by their own design. In the photo from Charlotte's graduation, I was only a shoulder and a sliver of hair, cropped out like I never quite belonged. I stood in the upstairs hallway, alone. The soft creak of old floorboards underfoot was the only sound accompanying me. The air smelled faintly of lemon oil and expensive forgetfulness. Along the wall, a gallery of triumphs stretched from floor to ceiling, a curated history in gold leaf frames. Charlotte in her valedictorian sash. Charlotte breaking the ribbon at her first half marathon. Charlotte at a podium, hand raised in mid-speech like she was born mid-applause. And then, halfway down the line, I found it, her college graduation photo. Harvard, of course. The camera captured her at the center, radiant in crimson and black, tossing her cap with theatrical joy. To her left, Dad beamed, one arm around her, the other raised in a proud salute. Marilyn stood on the right, chin lifted in a graceful smile, and behind them, barely visible, cropped so tightly it could have been by accident, was the pattern of a half shoulder, a sliver of brunette hair. Me. I leaned in, as if by squinting I could bring the missing part of myself back into the frame. But it was gone, like always. I hadn't been asked to take the photo. I'd leaned in late, literally and metaphorically. I had arrived from a training rotation in Fort Gordon, a red-eye flight, no makeup, boots still dusty. I remembered thinking, at least I made it. That had felt like enough. It never was. My hand brushed against the frame, and something in me itched. A memory I hadn't touched in years stirred, a silver bracelet, a birthday gift from my mother. The real one. The one before Marilyn. I had worn it every day until it vanished at summer camp the year I turned 12. The house was silent, but I could feel the tension tightening around me. In the dim light, I spotted the photo, Charlotte, always the center of attention, and there I was, invisible in the margins. I touched the frame, my fingers lingering on the cold glass. It was as if the image was mocking me. How could I ever make them see me? The question hung in the air, unanswered, leaving only the sharp echo of my own doubt. Was I meant to fade into nothing, or would I finally step into focus? I cried for 3 days, convinced someone had taken it, or, worse, tossed it away. No one looked, no one asked. Probably got lost in the woods, Dad had said. Let it go, Rebecca. But I never had. I moved slowly toward the guest room, the one they assigned me near the garage. The dresser was mostly empty, save for a single drawer that stuck slightly. Inside, I found a tangle of forgotten things. A spare ribbon, a cracked hairbrush, old holiday cards, some half-melted wax sachets, and there, tucked in a crumpled cloth napkin, was the bracelet, tarnished, bent slightly at the clasp, but unmistakably mine. My breath caught in my throat. I reached for it with fingers I hadn't realized were trembling. The metal was cool and familiar. My name was still etched faintly on the inside, though the letters had worn thin with time. They hadn't thrown it away. They just hidden it. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at it, years collapsing into a quiet, dense ache. Not anger, not yet, something softer, sadder, a confirmation of something I'd always known but never said aloud. You didn't throw it away, I whispered, my voice tight. You just hid it. Behind me, the hallway buzzed faintly with voices. Laughter floated up the stairs as if the party below were happening in a different reality, one where I didn't exist or never had. I slipped the bracelet into my pocket and stood. Something in the corner of the closet caught my eye. A small cardboard box marked in black Sharpie. Rebecca Junk. The word punched harder than expected. I knelt and opened it. Inside, a faded pencil sketch I'd drawn at 15, a woman in uniform, faceless but with posture precise as steel. A musical I'd won in 8th grade still looped on a red ribbon, and at the bottom, folded neatly, a page torn from a yellow legal pad. I unfolded it. It was a draft, a field report I'd never submitted, early training exercise simulation data annotated by hand in green ink. My ink. As I admired my rediscovered bracelet, a flicker of movement outside the window caught my eye, a shadow that didn't belong. Suddenly, my reflection in the glass shifted, revealing someone else's face layered behind mine. A stranger's expression, faint but unmistakable, whispered that my history wasn't just lost, it had been rewritten from the shadows. I had been watched all along. My fight for identity was intertwined with a secret far deeper than I ever imagined. What did they know? What had they seen? The rain began to fall, the scent of wet earth filling the air, mingling with the rustle of leaves outside. I felt the weight of my past pressing down, but now I was ready to confront it. Would I finally step into focus, or would I remain a ghost in my own life? The scent of dust and old paper clung to the room. A cracked photo frame, a forgotten relic of another life, sat on the edge of the desk. Rebecca's fingers brushed against the glass, tracing the image of a younger version of herself, full of hope. She could still hear her mother's voice, faint but clear. "Don't let them forget you." The sound of muffled footsteps from the hallway snapped her back, and she quickly tucked the frame into the drawer, as if it were something too dangerous to remember. She'd written that report after a 36-hour shift, then decided it was too rough, not good enough to turn in. But somehow, it had ended up here. Had they kept it, or had they simply never thrown it away? It was a question she couldn't shake. Rebecca sat back on her heels, the bracelet now heavy in her pocket. The field report felt different now, weighted with memories that hadn't seen daylight in years. There were no dramatic confrontations, no screams or slammed doors, just small, deliberate acts. Erasers, cropped photos, misplaced things, names written in black Sharpie. No hatred, just quiet control. As she folded the paper again and tucked it back into the box, the wind rattled faintly against the window, as if trying to remind her there was something else waiting. Inside this house, beneath the curated light, she was starting to find the shadows they couldn't quite hide. She had led command rooms with satellite uplinks and classified strike orders. Now, she was refilling glasses at a posh event, the stemware clinking lightly as she moved through clusters of manicured guests, their laughter effervescent as the wine. Her left hand, the same hand that once mapped evacuation routes in Kandahar, now poured Chardonnay with grace. No one noticed the difference. No one noticed the person beneath the surface. The ballroom was a well-lit portrait of wealth, golds, creams, and hydrangeas, the soft sounds of a string quartet blending into the background. Champagne towers glittered like unspoken threats. Rebecca wore navy, a civilian in the midst of this polished world. Marilyn passed her, trailing the scent of peonies and offering no gratitude, only a whispered command. They're low near the patio. You're good at organizing. Organizing? Her mind was sharp, but to them it was just a useful skill. Her aptitude wasn't seen as strategic. It wasn't seen as a reminder that the woman who had once commanded entire operations was still here, quietly but undeniably. Would they ever see her, or would she always be the woman who had been hidden in plain sight? The shadows were gathering, and she was starting to step into the light. Rebecca Carter stood motionless, a glass of Chardonnay in her hand. The world around her shimmered with opulence, but the weight of the years bore down on her. Charlotte had once said, "Rebecca likes instructions. She was born to serve, not lead." And yet, here she was, leading the movement of delicate finger foods through this glittering crowd. It was a battlefield of its own, quiet, controlled, and yet somehow still a war. She caught sight of Sarah. Their eyes met, the briefest of glances, but it was enough. The tension between them was thick, unspoken. Sarah raised her glass, a silent acknowledgement of the distance they'd kept for years. Rebecca nodded back. No words were needed. Not tonight. The applause swelled, filling the room with a false tide of joy. Charlotte stood at the center, radiant in pale green silk, her hand tightly clasped around Jonathan's as if claiming him, her victory, her announcement to the world. "And here he is," she said, her voice a sweet melody of triumph. Jonathan McAllister, polished and perfect, stood beside her, accepting praise with a modest smile. His posture was military, controlled, even in stillness. But then his eyes, those eyes, moved. They found Rebecca. The room seemed to pause, the clinking glasses fading into the background. He walked toward her, his gaze never leaving hers. She didn't flinch. He stopped just inches away, their eyes locked in a silent exchange. There was no greeting, no question, just recognition. Something old, something remembered. But before she could speak, Charlotte appeared, casual, dismissive. "Oh," she said, looping her arm through Jonathan's. "Ignore her. She's been odd lately." Rebecca remained still, watching as Jonathan let himself be led away, the unspoken weight of their past hanging in the air. Would he ever see her for who she truly was? Or would she remain invisible, a shadow in her own life? The room hummed with laughter and applause, but all Rebecca could hear was the sound of her own heart, pounding in her chest. What now? Would the ghosts of the past finally let her step into the light? Or would they swallow her whole, leaving her to disappear once again? The attic door creaked as if it hadn't been touched in years. Dust swirled in beams of light, casting long shadows on forgotten memories. The scent of cedar and old wool filled the air, thick with the weight of time. I climbed the ladder, my breath shallow, each step echoing louder than the last. A field report tucked under my arm felt like a relic, something lost, something I had buried deep. But there it was, hidden in plain sight, shoved beneath Christmas decorations, old tech manuals, and Charlotte's trophies. I froze when I found it. A single page, dated, stamped, and in my own handwriting. Operation Cold Moon, Draft R. Carter. How had it stayed there, untouched, forgotten? Was it the only thing left of me? My fingers trembled as I opened the first page. Radio intercepts, satellite markers, risk assessments. My mind flashed back to the desert heat. I could almost feel it, but then, near the bottom of page 3, written in red ink, "This saved us." The handwriting was sharp, disciplined, fast. I knew it. It was his, Jonathan McAllister. He had read it. He had respected it. He had even sought me out. I leaned back, my breath caught in my chest. The attic felt alive with echoes. Not empty. Not forgotten. I wasn't invisible here. Not anymore. But why hadn't he ever told me? Why hadn't he ever seen me for who I truly was? After all these years, could I finally reclaim my own identity from the shadows? Would I finally find the self-respect I'd been chasing all this time? The weight of the past hung heavy in the air, but in that attic, something changed. I wasn't ready to be forgotten anymore. Not by anyone. Not even myself. Rebecca stood there, surrounded by the clutter of years. The room smelled like dust and cedar, the kind of smell that clings to old memories, thick and suffocating, clutching an old journal, something she never even remembered having. Her fingers trembled. The pages, yellowed and frayed, barely held together. But it wasn't the pages that caught her attention. It was the handwriting. It was his, Jonathan McAllister. A name she thought had disappeared forever. Her breath caught. What was this? She flipped through the pages, the air in the room growing thicker. Each word pulled her deeper. Slowly, she realized something she hadn't even dared to hope for. She wasn't forgotten. She never had been. Even ghosts leave footprints, Rebecca, Sarah had said once, but she hadn't understood, not until now. The memory crashed back. Kandahar. A.M. Her back hunched over a satellite feed while everyone else slept or raged in the wake of loss. 3 lives lost in an ambush. It had been her fault, she thought. She hadn't flagged the right signals. She hadn't done enough. The report she wrote that night was an apology wrapped in regret. She had folded it away, convinced it didn't matter. But Jonathan had read it. Jonathan had remembered. As the silence of the attic pressed in around her, a soft voice from below broke it. Distant laughter, glasses clinking, Jonathan's voice calling out, "We're ready for the toast, Jonathan." But Rebecca wasn't ready. Not yet. The folder felt heavier than anything else in that room, pressing against her chest. It wasn't just paper. It was a reminder, a reckoning. He had remembered her. He had signed his life to a mission, barely surviving. And now, that mission, that report, was hers too. It was more real than anything else in her life. A memory she thought had been erased. A ghost she thought had vanished. But Rebecca Carter was no ghost. Not anymore. Rebecca Carter stood in the sunlit field, dry grass crackling under her feet, the scent of summer's dusty air mixed with something sharper, something colder. A distant engine rumbled, echoing memories, long drives with her family, unspoken goodbyes that never found their words. Her fingertips brushed over a battered photograph, edges frayed, corners bent from years of hiding. It was her father, or what she'd thought was him, clad in uniform, eyes closed, a ghostly smile frozen in time. The warmth of the sun pressed against her skin, yet inside, a hollow ache grew. Was she destined to stay invisible, erased from her own story? Her throat tightened as her gaze fixed on the photo. A flicker of longing ignited. She wanted to be seen, touched by her past again, to claim her voice, her identity, before it was gone for good. Days blur into moments of silence and memory, reality pressing against her like a storm. Behind her, the soft rustle of leaves matched her pounding heart. She clutched the photo tighter, feeling the weight of everything she's carried, stories buried, silence that screamed to be broken. What if her story could finally be heard? Her mind flashed to her childhood, to the long nights in Kandahar. Confusion, guilt, whispers of lives lost in ambush. The memories haunted her, fresh as if yesterday. She thought she'd buried them deep, but now they clawed their way back, demanding acknowledgement. Could she reconcile the person she was with the one she longed to become? The answer lingered in the trembling beat of her chest. She was no ghost. Not anymore. In that moment, standing amidst the wild grasses, she knew she'd found her truth. Somewhere between pain and resilience, she was reclaiming herself. There was no more silence, no more forgetting, and as the sunlight danced across her tear-streaked face, she whispered to the wind. Her story was hers to tell, and no one could erase her again. The air thickened with unspoken words, a tension that crackled like static. Rebecca's heart raced as Jonathan's shadow loomed closer, his silence louder than any accusation. The laughter from the party felt distant, a cruel reminder of the life she was losing grip on. She could feel the weight of the folded paper pressing against her chest, a secret that could shatter everything. What would happen if she finally spoke? Would her voice be heard, or would it be swallowed by the noise of the celebration? The question hung in the air, heavy and unresolved. Downstairs the house hummed with the energy of a party, its life pretending not to be over. People posed under the floral arch for pictures. Jonathan moved through them with purpose, his expression unreadable. The folded paper pressed against his chest like an unspoken pact. The photographer called for the full family shot, and Charlotte, as usual, took center stage, followed by Marilyn adjusting her dress and Dad smoothing his tie, all playing their roles. But Rebecca? She stood to the side, neither fully in nor out of the frame. Jonathan approached slowly. His presence shifted the air. People parted without realizing it, instinctively stepping aside. He didn't speak, didn't gesture, just stood there, a quiet disruption in the background of their perfect family portrait. The photographer kept calling for smiles, but Jonathan remained silent. As the session ended and people dispersed to cake and whiskey, he stepped closer. Rebecca didn't notice at first, then felt the brush of paper slipping into her coat pocket. Soft, deliberate. Jonathan leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "In case you forget who you are." Then, without another word, he walked away, leaving a quiet clarity in his wake. The party continued. Toasts were made to Charlotte's career, to Dad's golf score, and even to the new drapes. But no one mentioned the woman who'd saved a base from bombing. The main dining hall gleamed under the chandeliers, velvet drapes framing tall windows like gowns waiting for movement. The mahogany table shone so perfectly that Rebecca could see the reflection of her own clenched jaw. Around her, wine glasses waited in symmetrical alignment. And yet, she felt alone. Forgotten. A story that was slowly being erased. Would anyone notice her story? Would she ever be able to reclaim herself? Or would she remain a shadow, fading into the background of others' lives? The air felt thick with that unasked question, one she could no longer ignore. The scent hits me first. Leather aged by time, mingling with ash from a distant fire. I sit at my grandfather's weathered desk, fingertips tracing the worn grain, feeling the rough edges that tell stories no one's ever told me out loud. His voice haunts softly in my mind. Memories flood back. His warmth, the steady drum of his heartbeat, the unspoken pride that lingers long after he's gone. There's this photo, cracked at the edges, a face younger than mine, eyes a mirror of mysteries I'll never unlock. It's like I've been erased from my own story, hidden in the shadows of their history, a ghost in my own life. Why did I disappear? Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's the noise of silence that's louder than any shout. I ask myself, will I ever be seen? Will my name matter, or am I destined to fade into the background? Forgotten? Erased? Just another chapter for someone else to write. But I can't breathe in that silence much longer. The weight of invisibility presses down, harder every year. I need to reclaim my voice, to tell my story, loud enough to break through the echoes of neglect, because beneath it all, I know, I am here. I am real, and no one's leaving me behind. Not this time. Rain-slick streets gleam under the dull glow of streetlights. Rebecca Carter steps onto her porch, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth, mixed with a whisper of old gasoline lingering from her father's workbench. She traces the worn wood with trembling fingers, feeling the rough grain, like scars telling stories no one ever asked her to share. Memories flash, a gentle voice calling her name, the chime of her grandfather's watch pressing cold against her palm, and the half-forgotten warmth of being truly seen. Why did those moments fade? Why did she vanish, swallowed by silence, left behind in her own story? The ache of invisibility tightens like a constrictor. Shadows of forgotten histories dance behind her eyes, her own voice muffled, her identity erased. Does she matter? Will she ever break free? The rain begins to fall softly. each drop a reminder. Rebecca's breath catches. She whispers to herself, slow and steady, "No more hiding." Her shoulders straighten, because she knows deep down she's still here. Her story isn't over. Her voice isn't silent. Today, she'll reclaim what's hers, piece by piece, breath by breath, and this time, she's the hero in her own history. I didn't flinch. I held Jonathan's gaze, steady, like a mountain resisting the storm. Then, slowly, I reached for my glass of water, took a slow sip. Let the silence stretch thin between us, thick with unspoken words. Then, I broke it. "Sit down, Colonel," I said, voice flat. No need for theatrics. His hand loosened, but he remained standing, still in the storm he'd called up, letting it hang heavy like a cloud ready to burst. No one moved, no one dared to. The air was heavy, charged with tension. The dessert forks hovered above untouched panna cotta, trembling like leaves. Eyes flickered, moths lost in the dark. No quick escape. The silence had shifted, more than awkward, seismic, like tectonic plates grinding beneath the surface. Every dismissive toast, every smile that barely masked disrespect, all of it echoed in that immense quiet. I didn't flinch again. I let it settle, sit in that profound stillness. Marilyn, 2 seats to my left, leaned in and whispered, tense, just out of sight. Charlotte stared ahead, mouth tight, fingers trembling, clinging to control. Jonathan finally sank into his chair, posture smooth, unreadable. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Dad finally exhaled, his breath shaky and quiet. He reached for his wine, missed the glass, then tried again. When his eyes finally met mine, they weren't angry, weren't ashamed. They were vacant, like a flickering bulb, barely holding on. Charlotte's voice broke the silence, thin and breathless, trying to soften the moment. "Rebecca's always been shy, right?" She forced a smile, but it cracked before it could settle. From the far end of the table, a voice sliced through like a blade. "I've briefed her myself. She coordinated a mission from Germany last year. Her projections kept us alive out there." It was the man in the dark suit, a retired general, I realized now, sitting still like a marble statue. Command, still in his posture, authority in every breath he took. And in that silence, something shifted. Because I knew then that I'd finally claimed back my space, that my voice mattered, that I wasn't invisible anymore. In a dim room, thick with shadows and echoes from a life I'd buried, I stare at this faded photograph. It's me, young in military uniform, eyes bright, hands steady. But the years, the silence, the forgetfulness, they've made me invisible. My fingers tremble as I trace the cracks and wear. A scent of rain drifts in, carrying memories I can't brush away. Suddenly, from the shadows, an unexpected whisper. Soft at first, then clear. It's my voice, aged, strong, relentless, telling a story that no one has heard. Turns out I didn't just serve my country in quiet. I carried out covert missions, sacrifices erased from history, left to fade into obscurity. That revelation shatters my world, flipping the script I thought I knew. Who defines heroism? Who gets to erase what we've given? As that truth surfaces, I realize the struggle isn't just to be seen, but to reclaim the story that's mine. A story they thought was lost, but was only waiting to be remembered. The room was charged with an unspoken tension, like static before a storm. Rebecca's heart pounded as she scanned their faces, the weight of years of silence pressing on her chest. The air was thick, but the question lingered in the room, unasked. Could she reclaim the pieces of herself she had lost? The door creaked slightly, a reminder of her past, but the future. Was it waiting? She couldn't tell. The silence stretched, unbearable as her own voice threatened to crack under the weight of it all. "Your signature is on page 9. I thought you might want it, for your next student. I took it, not needing to look. I knew every line by heart. Thanks, I said simply. Behind him, the front door opened and Sarah stepped inside. She didn't smile, didn't say anything right away, just nodded once, eyes catching mine with that steady, unshakable trust she always carried. "Well played, ma'am," she said, and I could hear the faint edge of pride tucked behind her usual stoicism. Marilyn appeared in the hallway, then froze at the sight of me. She didn't speak, only hovered, unsure whether to confront or retreat. Her pearls sat askew, her expression tight with calculations she could no longer control. Charlotte emerged next, hair slightly tousled, makeup no longer flawless. The sheen of control had dulled. She opened her mouth. I raised a hand. Not tonight. She froze and, for once, obeyed. Jonathan stepped back, giving me room. Sarah moved beside me like she belonged there, because she did. I turned once more toward the interior of the house. The chandelier shimmered faintly in the distance, casting warped shadows. Beyond that, the table, the framed photos, the applause that came too late. "I don't live here," I said quietly to Jonathan. I never did. Then I stepped through the door and into the night. The wind was cool, brisk, almost bracing. Sarah held the car door open, keys already in hand. As we reached the bottom of the steps, she glanced over. "Drink?" I looked at her sideways. "Whiskey's on me," she added. "Only if you let me pick the battle next time." She smiled. "Deal." And we disappeared into the night, not as ghosts, but as commanders of our own silence. My father once told me I was a clever girl who wouldn't last in the real world. His letter began with, "Dear General Carter." The envelope sat on my desk like it didn't belong. Cream-colored, standard size, addressed in familiar blocky penmanship. My full name was written out, not Becky, not Miss, not even just Rebecca. In that moment, I felt the weight of my identity pressing down on me. I had fought for my place, for my voice, and now I was ready to reclaim my story. The past may have tried to erase me, but I was here, standing tall, ready to be seen. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: I would no longer be forgotten. The fluorescent lights buzzed, casting cold, sterile shadows across the room. I stared at the envelope. Cream-colored, plain, but oddly significant. It sat on my desk like it didn't belong, addressed in familiar blocky handwriting. "Dear General Carter." The words felt like a weight pressing down on my chest, suffocating me. I hadn't touched it for days. I'd fought to leave the past behind, but now it was staring me in the face. Could I finally face what was in that letter? The base was eerily silent, except for the faint hum of the overhead lights. The distant bark of a drill sergeant echoed through the halls, but I barely noticed. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope, revealing a single folded page. My father's handwriting was there, unmistakable, but something was off. The strokes, hesitant and unfamiliar, made my heart race. "I don't know how to start this." His words pulled me in, but I didn't want to read them. Yet I couldn't stop myself. Maybe I should have said something sooner. Maybe I should have looked closer. The words blurred before my eyes. Each one felt like a cold gust of wind, cutting deeper than I expected. "You never made noise." "That was the problem," Charlotte demanded. "You adapted." "I thought that meant you were fine." I couldn't breathe. I stepped back from the letter, then quickly returned as if it had a magnetic pull on me. For the first time, I felt the sting of his silence, his absence. He never apologized, not directly, but his words bled through the page, stitched together in quiet confessions. "Turns out it's the world that couldn't keep up with you." A breath caught in my throat. Was this really him? Was this really how he saw me? I closed my eyes, the weight of those words crashing down on me. I had always been alone in this battle. But now I wasn't. The phone buzzed on the desk and Sarah's voice broke the silence. You don't owe him a reply. Reading it is enough. Burning, it's fair, too. Her voice was calm, understanding. I didn't need to hear anything more. Without a word, I grabbed the lighter from my emergency kit and in one swift motion, set the letter aflame. It flared up bright, then faded to ash, falling silently into the metal trash bin. And just like that, the past was gone. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and stale coffee. Rebecca closed her eyes, letting the familiar smells wash over her. The creak of the door pulled her back to reality, the sharp rap of boots on linoleum echoing in the silence. Her fingers brushed the worn edges of letters she once wrote, the ink fading like the memories of her past. The small box in her hand felt heavier than it should, a weight that mirrored the life she had left behind. She held her breath, the cold outside seeping through the glass, her heart frozen in that moment before everything shifted again. But one line. She had clipped it before lighting the match. I see you now. It was pinned to the corkboard above her desk, a reminder to herself. Just beneath it, she scribbled a post-it. Let them see, but don't wait to be seen. The knock came lightly, and she turned to find a young sergeant in the doorway, her uniform crisp, posture impeccable, but her eyes betrayed a hint of nervousness. Ma'am, she said, a request just came in from West Point. They want you to lecture. Rebecca nodded once, her voice steady. Tell them I accept. Charlotte had once said the bracelet looked cheap. Now it arrived back in a velvet box, no note included. The mailroom buzzed with quiet fluorescent lights, humming like an old memory. She signed for the small package, expecting field gear or a restock of encrypted tags, but the return address was unfamiliar, just a Philadelphia P.O. box. She turned it over, curiosity piqued. The clerk raised an eyebrow. That's all for today, ma'am. Snow began to fall outside, fine as powdered sugar, dusting the ground with the idea of winter. Back in her community center, she shut the door behind her, setting the box on her desk, staring at it as if it might hiss. It wasn't heavy or grand, just precise, a velvet square no bigger than her palm. Opening it slowly, she found the bracelet nestled against the deep blue fabric. The silver piece she had lost, or rather been told she lost, at summer camp when she was 10. A delicate thing with a small compass charm and faint etching of her initials on the clasp. She remembered Charlotte scoffing at it once, saying it looked like something from a cereal box too small for her anyway. But here it was, polished and cared for, the clasp replaced. There was no note, not even a slip of paper with her handwriting, but she knew it was from her. The absence of words spoke volumes. Picking it up carefully, she turned it over in her fingers. It didn't fit now, hadn't in years. In that moment, Rebecca felt the weight of her past shift. She was no longer just a ghost in her own story. She was reclaiming her identity, piece by piece, and for the first time in a long while, she felt seen. The afternoon sun filters through cracked blinds, casting jagged patches on faded wallpaper. Rebecca stands there, a younger version, the room cluttered with memories too heavy to ignore. She clutches a weathered photo, trembling hands fighting to hold her own past. The scent of burnt coffee lingers, mingling with the distant sirens warning everyone in her city that chaos never rests. Somewhere inside her, laughter echoes, faint, nostalgic, before dissolving into deafening silence. Her fingers trace the cold edge of a military medal, the weight of unspoken words pressing down hard. Her heartbeat pounds in her ears, a relentless reminder. She's been erased, forgotten, pushed aside. But her story isn't over. No, it's only just beginning to breathe again. This moment, the quiet crack of her resolve, marks the first step toward finding herself after years of silence, after fighting to be remembered. Her path forward is clear, even through the shadows that once tried to drown her. Now she's here, standing in her present, but the echoes of her past still whisper. The scars, visible and unseen, are part of her map. That bracelet, the one Charlotte scorned, the one she lost, still holds a fragment of her soul. It's a symbol of resilience, of reclaiming what was stolen piece by piece. The weight of her history escorts her, every challenge, every silent battle, adding strength to her stride. She looks at her reflection, knowing her journey isn't defined by what was taken, but by what she chooses to rebuild. Because nobody can erase her entirely. Not anymore. And as she steps forward, the future feels heavier, but somehow lighter too, because she's finally reclaiming herself, piece by piece. The story isn't finished yet. It's just beginning to unfold. Rebecca stood before the room, her military dress blues feeling heavier than the fatigues she'd once worn in battle. With a click, the heat map from Operation Cold Moon filled the screen. No names, just terrain, threat proximity, and escape routes. She let the data speak for itself. This, she began, her voice steady, is what empathy looks like when it's rendered in data. She paused, allowing the room to lean in. She wasn't here to explain the mission in technical jargon. She was here to explain the cost, to show them how one minor delay, a shift in tone, could change everything. Leadership wasn't about barking orders. It was about seeing the cracks before someone fell through. Then a cadet raised her hand. Her posture was perfect, but her eyes... Those eyes reminded Rebecca too much of her own at 20. "What if they still don't see us, ma'am?" The room fell silent. Rebecca's breath caught for a moment, the weight of her own past in those words. "Then see each other," she replied. "That's where it starts. Visibility isn't granted. It's practiced. First here, then out there." She saw the senior cadet, Morris, shift in his seat, his pen frozen mid-note. Another slide appeared. No data this time, just a quote from an after-action review. Operative maintained cohesion through calm under fire. Beneath it, her own words. Leadership is quiet until it has to be loud. She turned back to the class, her voice soft but firm. "We are trained to endure, but that doesn't mean we're meant to be silent." With a chalk in hand, she moved toward the board and wrote, "Visibility is not validation. Earned truth needs no spotlight." A hush fell over the room. Then, one by one, they rose, not rushed, not dramatic, but deliberate. First Morris, then Reyes. Row by row, the entire hall stood. They didn't clap. They didn't have to. The act of standing was enough. It wasn't about rank. It was about resonance. Rebecca stood taller, for the first time in years feeling seen. No longer a shadow of her past, but the embodiment of the future she was reclaiming. The silence in the room was thick. Rebecca Carter stood tall, flawless in her calm. Her eyes flicked over the faces, eyes that had seen a lot. She paused, letting that silence stretch just long enough to sink in. Then she nodded once, a silent signal to dismiss the class. She was finally seeing herself again. Really seeing herself as more than just a ghost of who she used to be. For the first time in a long, long time, a picture on her desk caught her eye. An envelope, weighty with meaning. No return address, just Jonathan's handwriting, sharp and deliberate, like a command rather than a gift. Her hands trembled slightly as she sliced it open. Habit, not ceremony. Inside, wrapped in matte tissue, was a simple wooden frame. No bells, no whistles, just understated. Inside the frame, a photo that stopped her cold. It was her, side by side with Cadet Reyes. They stood in West Point's lecture hall. Reyes, mid-laugh, head tilted in pure relief. And she, centered, clear, unshadowed, the words underneath, "For when you forget they're looking now." written in Jonathan's precise script. Rebecca sank back, letting the moment settle. Outside, rain tapped softly against the window. The wind whispered secrets only the night understood. She felt something shift, like a fracture healing inside her. They handed her the smallest chair at the table once. Now, she built tables. She taught others to do the same. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then she typed the final line of her story. You are not their absence. You are your own presence. A breath released, not victory, more like something finally aligned, a silence that had lasted years slipping into place. She leaned back, eyes closed. Almost there. Almost. But what's next? The sky trembled with a low thunder, rolling through the city like an unspoken warning. I reached for the jasmine tea Sarah brought earlier, still warm, with that gentle floral scent that somehow feels like a hug in a cup. She arrived without fuss. No grand entrance, just that knowing smirk, a quiet reminder that sometimes endings aren't as loud as they seem. My desk was nearly empty, just the manuscript, scattered notes, and a simple olive wood bookmark delivered by Reyes that morning. Her handwriting etched into the wood, carrying a message for the general who thought he needed applause. I smiled. She hadn't lingered to explain, only slipped it on my desk during drills. A silent gesture, just like the small nod I once gave Sarah under an unforgiving Afghan sun. An unspoken, enduring language of resilience. I took a sip, reading the line again. Presence, not applause. That's what mattered now. As Sarah sat across from me leaning in, her gaze sharp, she wasn't smiling, but speaking plain. You're not just a voice anymore. You're the silence that made others speak. I didn't answer, not because I disagreed, but because the weight had shifted. Outside, cadets in damp uniforms hurried past, heads bowed against the mist. A few caught my eye and nodded. Small, subtle acknowledgments, no flags, no fanfare. Legacy isn't loud, it's quiet. It's built in moments like these, in the small nods and the silent determination that follows. The book I cradle now bears a simple title, but the subtitle reveals it all. The quiet that remembered what they forgot I became. I carry the envelope to the mailbox myself. No ceremony, no fanfare. I let the story go free, finally. It belongs to the world now. On my way out, I pass the glass cases where past instructors are listed. Last week, my name was etched into the new panel. Small, precise, undeniable. Outside, the rain thickens again. I don't rush. Instead, I pull off my name tag, fold it into my pocket, and step into the storm. The drops find my skin. The silence, the resilience, it's finally mine. Rebecca stared at the screen, her heart pounding, the words flashing like lightning. The message from Reyes hit her hard, so heavy it made her feel that storm surge again. You already are. Keep showing up, they'll follow. She paused, breath shallow. That cold gust of truth swept over her, the kind that leaves you shivering, but also jolts you awake. She'd always led, even when no one saw it, silent, steady, unbreakable. The mirror reflected not just her face, but her story, her pieces stitched together from battles she hadn't spoken of. That general they'd tried to erase? Still standing, still fierce. She was the force they forgot. The hero in quiet resilience. The one who remains when the world moves on. Her legacy was never about medals. It's the heartbeat of perseverance, echoing in every small nod, every silent vow, every time she refused to be erased. Because the truth, the real fight isn't loud. It's the quiet, relentless roar of a woman reclaiming herself. In the dim attic, Rebecca Carter's fingers brushed against a dusty, unmarked box buried beneath years of memories. Its presence hidden in shadows, forgotten like so much of her past. She hesitated, heart pounding as she pulled it into the light. Inside, Faded photographs and yellowed letters spilled out like secrets long suppressed. The scent of old paper hit her. That faint trace of lavender that once meant comfort now felt like a punch to the gut. As she gently sifted through the relics, her eyes caught a photograph of her childhood self, smiling with her grandmother. She thought she knew her story. But then she found a letter, deciphering shaky handwriting that revealed the truth. Someone she trusted had erased her identity, buried her history in the shadows. That discovery flips everything. The fight for respect isn't just about external validation anymore. It's about confronting a family secret that rewrote her story. Suddenly, her journey to reclaim her identity becomes a battle for her very soul, no longer just a quest for recognition. What else might have been hidden all these years? How much of her life was kept in the dark, by design? With every faded photo and worn letter, the line between memory and betrayal blurs. The old house feels heavier now, every creak echoing her secretive past. The rain outside intensifies, mirrors her storm, the aching for truth, the desperate need to be seen. Rebecca's resilience is one thing, but this revelation? It's a reckoning. Her fight shifts from outside validation to owning her truth, a personal war that's been waiting for her all along. And in that quiet attic, illuminated by flickering candlelight, she begins to see her story anew, raw, unfiltered, and utterly hers. I sat alone in the secure booth, the retinal scanner blinking amber beside me. The system was waiting for a decision I had already made. Override protocol internal audit. Subject Rivers Sloan clearance strategic tier level. 9. I spoke clearly, letting my voice weave into the machine's listening grid. A brief delay followed, then the screen responded with a sterile confirmation tone. I was in. It felt strange to see my name in government font again. Years of operations and silence had trained me to erase footprints, not retrace them. But this wasn't about nostalgia. This was about facts, evidence, truth that had grown dust where it should have sparked alarms. The file appeared barebones, skeletal. Name, ID number 1, photo, West Point enrollment 1 year. Status, inactive. Reason, psychiatric instability. Candidate deemed unfit for extended service. Signed, dated May 2004. The digital signature was unmistakable. David R. Rivers. I stared at it longer than I should have, not because I doubted, but because even now, 20 years later, a part of me still hoped it would be someone else. I leaned back, fingers steepled, letting the implications settle in the corners of the room. David hadn't just abandoned me. He'd taken steps to ensure the system forgot I ever existed in it. He hadn't destroyed me. He'd deleted me. The monitor's glow outlined my jaw. I reached into the inner pocket of my coat and pulled out a folded slip of paper, a handwritten log I jotted earlier that week. Names of people who might have known the old system before automation replaced them. One name had a small star beside it, Fulton Charles, a retired clerk known for remembering everything. Rumored to have once flagged a general's fake citation and lived to tell it. I found him in the archives annex near Judiciary Square, tucked behind an unmarked door with peeling paint and the scent of boiled coffee. The light flickered in half the hallway. I knocked twice. "Fulton," I called. As I waited, the air thickened with anticipation. The faint rustle of leaves outside echoed my racing heart. What truths lay hidden behind that door? Would he remember me? The rain began to fall, its scent mingling with the stale coffee, a reminder of the storm brewing within me. When the door creaked open, I was met with a pair of weary eyes. "Sloan Rivers," he said, recognition flickering like a candle in the dark. But then, as I delved deeper into the file, a chilling realization washed over me. The name David R. Rivers wasn't just a signature. It was a ghost from my past, a brother I thought I had lost to the shadows of memory. The sterile glow of the screen cast an eerie light on my face, illuminating the fear and anger swirling within me. How could he have erased me? The walls of the booth seemed to close in, echoing my isolation. This revelation shifted my quest from reclaiming my identity to confronting the haunting legacy of my family. How many others felt this way? How many stories were hidden behind closed doors, waiting to be told? The rain outside continued to fall, relentless, a reminder of the fight for my identity that was just beginning. Rebecca Carter stood in the dimly lit room, the weight of years pressing heavily on her. Her fists clenched. Memories came flooding back, her voice drowned out, erased by time. She was just another forgotten story, another name lost to history. A single tear traced down her cheek, glistening in the faint light from the window. The silence in the room seemed almost suffocating. But then, she did something she hadn't done in years. She spoke. Her voice cracked at first, but with each word, it grew stronger. She was reclaiming her narrative, piece by piece. She wasn't just fighting to be heard. She was fighting for the right to remember herself. The silence shattered as her resilience burned brighter than ever. This was no longer about reclaiming a name. It was about reclaiming her life, her self-respect. Rebecca Carter was ready to be remembered. Her eyes locked onto the old filing cabinet, rusted and filled with forgotten logs, a symbol of the past she couldn't escape. Each drawer pulled open revealed secrets, long buried. "Nothing digital about this part," the clerk said. He handed her a file, and the notation was unmistakable. A chilling realization gripped her heart. "David Rivers," she whispered. The name was her father's. Her pulse quickened. She hadn't realized how deeply the past was buried inside her. Would it set her free, or trap her further in a history she never asked for?